Today on my main channel over at youtube.com/timcast, I made a video about Venezuela, and it's a very complicated subject. I was actually looking at issues of immigration, and I started building out the thread for, so basically what I do when I'm building out these videos for my main channel, I set up a bunch of tabs with a bunch of different information as I do my research. And I did that for the story on immigration, but I just couldn't really break down one important question. How many Americans support illegal immigration? What I mean by that, are there Americans? There are, but what percentage of them are saying straight up, there should be no illegal immigrants, period, and anybody should be able to come into this country? I think that question mostly comes down to the idea of open borders versus secure borders. And it's all, I don't think any poll has been done with a simple question. Do you believe anyone should be allowed to enter your country at any point of their own volition, whenever they choose? For the most part, we see stories about, is the government doing enough to stop illegal immigration, like this one? We see things like, do you think the border should be more secure? The best I could find is that there was a poll in a story from the Washington Post that said 79% of Americans want their borders secured. That doesn't mean a wall. Actually, most people do oppose the wall. So does that mean 21% of this country are totally open to just open borders, anybody can come in? Not necessarily. And that's a challenge. But I do want to read through some of the stories, and I want to just talk about this idea of support for immigration. And I'll tell you why I did. Ocasio-Cortez tweeted this: "It's hard for them to admit, but a wall is not what Americans want and never has been. In recent Pew polling, almost 60% of Americans oppose a wall." Okay. A record high, 75% of Americans say immigration is good for the U.S. That is called a non sequitur. The only radical hostage taker here is the Republican Party. The reason I say it's a non sequitur is that what it means is these two things have nothing to do with each other. It sounds like they do. But immigration is not illegal immigration. They're very different things. When someone thinks of immigration, they think of someone filling out paperwork at the consulate and saying, I'd like to come to the United States. I'm a specialist. I'm requesting a visa. I have a job. And then, they come to the U.S. on a green card, or they marry somebody. Yeah, that's immigration. Illegal immigration is people getting visas, flying here and overstaying their visas, or it's people running through the border. It's very different. I want to know what percentage of Americans say illegal immigration is good for the U.S., and apparently I couldn't find it. But I did pull up a bunch of data, and we can go through this. So on January 11th, just this past month, Rasmussen said, in the midst of a government shutdown over disagreements about building a border wall, 2 out of 3 voters still think illegal immigration is a serious issue. But nearly half of voters think the government isn't working hard enough to stop it. Even here, we can see 2 out of 3 voters think it's a serious issue. So what? A third think it is an issue but not serious? What does that mean? I couldn't find out. A new Rasmussen reports national telephone and online survey finds that 40% of likely U.S. voters think the government is doing too little to stop illegal immigration, up 5 points from 43% who felt the same way in August. 28% believe the government is doing too much to stop illegal immigration, down from 34%, while 17% think the government level of action is just about right. The reason this is interesting, the first bit of data, is that the biggest bracket, it's not the majority of Americans, but it's the biggest bracket in the poll. 40% think the government needs to do more. So Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez can claim, oh, it's the Republican Party holding people hostage because everyone supports, 75% support immigration. Half of people polled about want to see more action take place. So we have, this is another bit of interesting data that is also very important for this narrative that's being pushed out by many Democrats who kind of omit the issue about illegal immigration. In your view, should immigration be kept at its present level, increased, or decreased? And this is what's interesting when Cortez says that 75% support immigration. Okay, well, present level, 39%, decreased, 29%, and increased 28%. So yes, if you say present level and increase show support for immigrants, then you can claim that around 75% or so are supporting immigrants. But you still have to consider that there's a decent amount of people who oppose that, who actually want to go the other direction. So it's not so simple. Next, we have this from Pew Research Center: How Americans See Illegal Immigration, the Border Wall, and Political Compromise. One of the issues with trying to put a video together for my main channel is that you'll notice on my second channel, the videos I do, I kind of just talk. I talk about how I feel. In this, I was able to find all of these different data points, but some of them are contradictory, Some of them don't really relate to each other, and I couldn't find the data actually needed. This from Pew Research, which I pulled up from January 16th in response to what Cortez said. I still couldn't find what she was claiming to be true. So we'll read this. It's a standoff between President Donald Trump and Democratic congressional leaders over how to address unauthorized immigration at the U.S.-Mexico border has led to a partial shutdown of the federal government, one that is now the longest on record. The United States was home to 10.7 million unauthorized immigrants in 2016, a 13% decline from its peak, 12.2 million in 2007, according to the most recent Pew Research Center estimates. They called Obama the deporter-in-chief. Keep that in mind. So in 2007, we're at a peak. Obama comes in, starts getting rid of these people. Meanwhile, a growing share of unauthorized immigrants were not people who had entered the country illegally, but had arrived legally and then overstayed their visas. Let's just look at some of the points they make. The vast majority of immigrants in the U.S. are in the country legally, but fewer than half of Americans know that's the case. I feel like that ultimately doesn't matter at all. A lot of people don't know a lot of things. It's kind of a weird thing to point out. Sure, there are illegal immigrants here. Many people support that. Most don't care. People are concerned about illegal immigrants. And this is the big challenge in trying to understand whether people were concerned about it or not. I can say from the first poll, about half of people polled do think it's a serious issue. And that still opens the door to a certain amount of people saying it's an issue but not serious. Republican and Democrat voters sharply disagree over whether illegal immigration is a major problem in the U.S. That's obvious. A majority of Americans oppose substantially expanding the wall along the U.S. border, as Trump has sought, while 40% support doing so. They say, according to a January 29 survey by the Center, attitudes diverge sharply by party. Around 8 in 10 Republicans and Republican-leaning independents, 82% support expanding the wall, while an even larger share of Democrats and Democratic leaners, 93%, oppose it. This is why it's probably important for Trump to get the wall done, and it's why he's so adamant and hell-bent on doing it. 82% of those who lean Republican or are Republican want to see it happen. So if Trump wants to win re-election, not only do they want him to do this, but he needs to keep his promise. They say in the current stalemate over expanding the border wall, both opponents and supporters of the idea see political concessions as unacceptable. Many Americans disapprove of the way the shutdown negotiations are being handled. A little over a third of Americans approve of Trump's handling of the negotiations, while the same share approves the way congressional Republicans are handling the situation. Public view of Democrats' leaders' handling of the shutdown talks are somewhat more positive than views of Trump or GOP leaders, still less than half. And that's really surprising to me, considering Trump kept coming out with offers and the Democrats just kept saying no, 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 no. I actually would put more blame on the Democrats for this one than I would on Trump, especially when you consider 82% of Republicans, or those who lean Republican, want the wall. Disagreement between partisans extends to the effects of a wall. Around 7 in 10 Republicans, 69%, say substantially expanding the wall along the U.S. border with Mexico would lead to a major reduction in illegal immigration in the country, according to the January 2019 survey. About the same share of Democrats, 70%, say it would not have much impact on illegal immigration into the U.S. Well, those Democrats are plumb wrong. Straight up wrong. It is a fact. Walls work. Barriers work. There's one, I can't remember which country, but I did a story about this a while ago, years ago. It was a 3-meter chain link fence. Right? You know chain link fences? It's a thin thing you see at a baseball field. Like when you go to a local park, you can snip it with wire cutters. That easy. It dropped the illegal entries by something like 95%. The reason for this is that families that are coming in the older folks and the kids can't get over a 3-meter fence. Young men can, but many women, children, and adults couldn't do it. So they didn't even bother. Yes, they could have brought wire cutters, but they didn't. And my only assumption, the assumption I would make is that they said, let's not bother going that way. Let's go a different route. And that's what happened. So the wall stopped people from crossing over to like a ridiculously high degree. They went a different way. When it comes to the border wall of Mexico, it will stop people from crossing over, plain and simple. People like to point out tunneling over the wall, tunneling under the wall, climbing over the wall. Sure, that will happen. Keep in mind, you're still talking about a very large portion of people who just walk across the border and then claim asylum when the border guards stop them. The people who are tunneling underneath, that's not that many. So the issue is it's really strange to me that people don't understand the concept of building a fence. Like, everybody has a fence. Like, I got a fence in my backyard, don't you? They say, proximity to the Mexican border is a factor in Republicans' view of a border wall. Republicans overwhelmingly favor building a wall along the entire border, but Republicans who live closer to the border are somewhat less likely to favor it, according to an analysis by the Center. Long before the shutdown began, most Democrats and nearly half of Republicans said the U.S. would ultimately pay for a wall. Americans are more inclined to prefer politicians who stick to their positions than those who make compromise with people they disagree with. Trump needs to build the wall, plain and simple. He's got to keep his promise, and most Republicans want to see it done. Whatever else I think of him, about 2/3 of Americans, including around half of Democrats, say Trump stands up for what he believes in. Even, for good or bad, they believe it. Most Americans hoped for efforts at cooperation between Trump and the Democratic leaders in the current Congress. Well, that's just too damn bad, I guess. So, look, I pulled up a ton of data. Ultimately, the question remains, what percentage of Americans want open borders? Completely open borders. That's the question. It's a hard question to ask. What percentage of Americans think immigrants coming in of their own free will without being stopped, without any checks, just walking straight in and doing their thing, how many Americans believe that it's a good thing? That's what I wanted to find. Admittedly, it's just cursory research. I didn't get too far into it. Decided to do a video on Venezuela instead, so here we are. But anyway, I got another video coming up in a few minutes, and it'll be on this channel. I'll see you then.